Hello, I'm Liam Quinn with Delightful Computing, also at Paligo. And I'm here to talk about, or I'm not here to talk about, accessible print. What do I mean by accessibility? The things we make, whatever they are, should be usable by as many people as possible, subject to inherent limits of the medium, for example. There's nothing you can do to make a radio accessible to someone deaf, but they ought to be able to turn it on and off so that other people can listen, for example. More than half of people have special needs around accessibility. They're not special needs if it's more than half, they're majority needs. So this stuff really does matter as well as being legislated. Let's start with text sizes and font sizes. Text smaller than 11 point. It's going to be pretty difficult for a lot of people to read or off-putting. You can get away with slightly smaller text in print than on the screen, but only slightly. Smaller than 9 point though, and many people will just stop reading, they won't read it at all. Then it's not accessible because people didn't access it. A large X height helps. It's really the size of the majority of lowercase letters that matters the most. In some languages it matters, you can see the accents too. Depends too on reading distance, obviously. But around 9 and 9.5 point is a good minimum. You also need to think about the contrast, the ratio between foreground and background lightness. In print this depends on the colour, the texture and the glossiness of the paper, as well as on how dark the ink is, what colour you've chosen to print in, and the ambient lighting of the person reading. Smaller text sizes usually need more contrast, but it's not easy to measure, it's just something to bear in mind. About 8% of men, on slide 5, about 8% of men, 0.5% of women will see, for example, reds and greens as browns, or they'll see red as black, or some other combination of colours. And more than half of these people are unaware. That's roughly 5% of people are colourblind and don't know it. Keep in mind the consequences of people not seeing the different colours in your document. Right, so print in black and white and see if it works, for example. Speaking of black and white, dark mode has become popular, but in print, thin light coloured lines on a dark background, they get eaten away and look thinner and become thinner than you expect. So you need to use bold, strong fonts with low contrast, low difference between thick and thin lines. And sometimes you need to add letter spacing as well, depending on how much the ink spreads. Talk to your printing house. Small sizes of text over a coloured background can also be hard to read, or even a grey background, because of the dot screen process. You can't print grey, you have to print lots of dots, and those dots introduce a high frequency component that interacts with the typeface. And if colours are misaligned, which a registration problem is fairly common in a lot of printing technologies, then your thin text might have little bits of yellow fringing or red cyan fringing or magenta fringing, and that can make it very distracting to read. Again, talk to the printing house. They know. Whether or not they're yellow fringed, typefaces matter. Studies in the English language at least show very clearly that people read serif fonts much better than sans. They remember more of what they read and understand better. And Garamond is the most trusted typeface, especially in the United States. If you want people to believe a message, say it in Garamond. Huge studies over a long period have confirmed this. It's really not in doubt at this point. Slightly irregular fonts, like the one I'm using for these slides, IMFL, help dyslexic people. Specialist dyslexic fonts, on the other hand, hinder people who are not dyslexic. So I use this font as a compromise. Keep unusual letter shapes though to large sizes. Things like watch out for strange ampersands, for example. People might have to puzzle them out slowly if they're not familiar with the letter shapes, and it can be a hinge. Anything that slows people down reduces understanding. Another thing that can affect understanding is whether your text is justified. It turns out people read fully justified text much better than left-aligned text and understand more. I was surprised by this. Regular line lengths and good word spacing. So line and good line spacing of 1.2 to 1.5 of font space. Sorry, it's a mistake in my slide there. Leads to the highest comprehension. It should say regular line lengths, good word spacing and good line spacing lead to the highest comprehension. But at line lengths over 50 characters or so, people start misreading, so keep your lines suitably short and use hyphenation to keep word spaces even. We all need to know where we are. I mean, a city like Prague, old Prague, is really difficult to find your way in because little gnomes come and rearrange all the streets and move the buildings when you're not looking, and you walk back an hour later and things are not the same. In a book, running heads and footers are very important to help you know where you are. So the running head will typically have the chapter title on every page, or every odd numbered page, and the even ones will have the book name, and the footer will have the page number in it at least. Beginnings of chapters need to be big and bold so you can find them when you flip through the publication. Use headings to help give context and show people where they are. Transitions between sections can be usefully marked with an initial cap, a larger first letter, or with a line if there's no title. That way when you're flipping through, you find the beginning of the section quickly. People do need constant clear reminders about where they are, and the study of print and typography and people with cognitive differences is still in its infancy, but we know this much. So these have just been a very few things. Here's a few more, not related to type, to font size. In a publication with endnotes or footnotes and links, don't make people flip pages. Use margin notes or footnotes, because flipping pages is very disruptive. Margin notes are much less disruptive than footnotes because you go horizontally to find, or assuming horizontal text, to find the note, and then you can easily go back to the line you were on before because it's parallel. It helps to use different footnote markers for explanations and for citations to references. So 1, 2, 3, for example, for explanations. References to other publications could be just in a bibliography, and you wouldn't need to look at them all directly because you use it differently. Cross-references. Try and give good information. See chapter 16, A Holiday in Moria, on page 96. Gives the title, I've got an idea if I want to go there, it gives the chapter number, and it gives the page number. If it's on this page, then don't do that, say on this page, and if your software can't do that, get better software. Make sure that page numbers are easy to see and read. If you just sent someone to page 96, they're flipping through, the page numbers should be near the outside edge, also called the foredge of a book, and they must of course be in at least 9.5 point text and clearly separated, otherwise people can't find them and they'll get lost. Well, don't you get lost, but this is my last slide, so I'm going to get lost. Here are some references that may help you. The first one is about text sizes and has some references that may help about studies. Colin Wheeldon's book, you love or hate, but it's one of the few books on the subject. He's constantly trying to say how important his book is, but it does talk about lots of the studies of readability and understanding. And then there's specialist sites like colorblindawareness.org. I'll leave that up. Thank you very much for listening.